Ontario Caregiver Organization.
Go this way.
Oh, go this way. My whole life is being ordered around by women.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. I have like a loud voice. Okay. So my name is Bridget Labby, and thank you so much for inviting me and having me share the organization with you. Like was mentioned, I was born and raised in Azilda, but moved out west in the 80s. My father was a pipe fitter. We moved out there when it was booming. You know, enjoyed the Rocky Mountains and going skiing, but eventually came back here, and I came back here myself at, was 27 years old, and I actually worked right in this space at the Snowflake restaurant. Do you remember that? Yeah, I just came here one day. I said, I'd like to be a waitress. They said, can you start tomorrow? I said, yeah, I'm ready to go. Yeah, so anyways, so today is Young Carers Awareness Day. So do you know anyone ages 25 years of age and under who has been a caregiver or who is a caregiver today? Raise your hand. Including your children, your relatives, anyone 25 years of age and under, well, today is their day. It's a designated day for them, for that age group. Can everyone see the screen? Okay, great. So the Ontario Caregiver Organization, you'll often in the future hear it as OCO, as an acronym, okay? So if someone says OCO, you might want to remember that it stands for this. So it's a brand new organization funded through the Ministry of Health. We're about a year old, and I joined in August of 2019. So I'm new to the organization, and I'm the regional facilitator for Northeastern Ontario. So my area is Nipissing, Algoma, Manitoulin Island, right up to Wawa, Chapleau, Kirkland Lake, that whole entire circle. So I'm quite busy. So our vision and mission, our vision is all caregivers in Ontario will feel supported and valued. That's our goal. And our mission is improving the caregiving experience in Ontario. Very similar. So raise your hand if you yourself, and I'm sure all of your hands are going to come up, you've been a caregiver at one point in your life, or currently are, and I'll raise my hand too. So I'm going to share with you some statistics about caregivers in Ontario, and then I'll explain to you what we as an organization want to achieve and to support people like yourselves. So the Ontario Caregiver Organization exists to support Ontario 3.3 million. There are 3.3 million unpaid caregivers in Ontario. These are not paid caregivers. These are unpaid. Friends taking care of friends. Neighbors taking care of neighbors. Daughters taking care of mom. And when I say caregivers, you don't have to be considered a caregiver if it's only long term. You could just be caring for a friend that has a broken collarbone for X number of weeks. We're all going to be there at one point or another more than once. So caregiving comes in all shapes and sizes, long-term, short-term, and you know that. All right. Now, it was asked earlier, how many of you have ever heard of us? I don't think a lot of hands came up. Okay, but we're new, we have to spread the word, and this is one of the really good ways of for us to share who we are to large groups like yourselves. Then you could then share that with friends and family and agencies. So out of the 3.3 million caregivers in Ontario, who are they? Who do they represent? So you'll see it's almost as many women as there are men who are caregiving. And what are the age groups? 30% of caregivers are under the age of 35. 59% of caregivers are ages 36 to 65. and 11% of caregivers are 65 and over. Does that sound about right or look about right? Most caregivers are employed, married, have partners, and are parents themselves. So we call that the sandwich generation. So I'll use me as an example. I was a caregiver for some brief time. My father unfortunately passed away of prostate cancer at the age of 70, but he battled the disease for 9 years. The first 8 years, he was pretty good. He was doing quite well. Just that last 9 months to 3 months was tough. So as a daughter, I was providing care not only to my father, but to my mother. And because I have a background in working in the health industry, my mother would ask me, Bridget, who should we call about this? What do you know about that? Right? Like I was the Google girl. So now my mother is, she's 71 and I'm 50, and I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 24-year-old daughter. So my 24-year-old daughter lives on her own. She's doing good, so check. But I have a 16-year-old today, very difficult generation. And I'm a mom, I'm a worker, and I'm a daughter to my mother. My mother's doing well. She's 71 and healthy, but God forbid that tomorrow she gets hurt. It doesn't have to be a disease. It could be an injury. So we're the sandwich generation, and there's many people like myself. Half of caregivers are providing care to their own parents and their in-laws. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. I've even met caregivers who are caring. I've met women who are caring for their ex-husband, like the father of their child, because they feel they kind of /want to /need to. Okay, so caregiving comes in all, sometimes it's not by choice, but we're in a predicament that you feel like you're the only person that could reach out. Okay? So who are caregivers caring for? You're caring for people who are living with old age, who are frail, and often have dementia and Alzheimer's. So those are the top three. Okay, my mom has none of the above. So I don't need to care for my mom for any of those reasons. But you know, it's good for me as a daughter when she lives alone to check in on her once in a while. Make sure and also make sure she's emotionally well. She might be physically well, but how is she handling her emotions and the loneliness? Caregivers are taking care of children with a mental illness, a disability, whether it's developmental or physical. Adults dealing with health conditions, as 20% of the people they're caring for have back problems, chronic long-term pain, maybe recovering from surgery, cancers, and mental illness. So are you surprised with the percentages there? Look how high mental health illness is. Mm-hmm. And now these are people that were surveyed and were asked these particular questions. I mean, I wonder if 20 years ago, how many of those people that were experiencing mental illness would admit to it, right? They would just kind of skip that category. Mm-hmm. So this is a reality. Now, is caregiving rewarding? Yes, it is for many. You're feeling a sense of pride. You're feeling like you're giving up your time. You're learning a lot about the person you're caring for. You're developing you're going to have good days, bad days, but definitely you wouldn't be doing it if there was no reward for you. Now, is there an impact as a caregiver? What's affected in our own life? Many things. It takes up a lot of our time. We need to travel. We are there physically, financially. We're losing sleep. We're feeling stressed. It's affecting our mental health. So would you agree that 1 in 5 caregivers are not handling the situation well? Would you agree with that? Mm-hmm. This is particularly true when coping mentally or emotionally, especially if you're caring for someone who has a mental illness. Now, if you're caring for someone who has a broken hip, a broken limb, a physical injury, that's one area. But if you're caring for someone who has an addiction, a mental illness, severe depression, those types of conditions make it very difficult, regardless of who the patient is, regardless of age. Now, when I said the 3.3 million unpaid caregivers, so can you imagine you got a paycheck for every time you cared for a friend or a family member, and the government paid you $14 an hour, and you timed yourself, and you got a check. Well, how much would that cost the province of Ontario? Billions of dollars. So it's really important that we as an organization listen and hear your wish list as caregivers. What is your wish list? What are your concerns? Then we can then be your voice, and then we could help make those changes in the near future, not the future, I mean near future. Okay. It's not going. It's not going. Okay, so I guess it's frozen. I can't move on to the next one. So let me explain what we are particularly working on, okay? We want caregivers to find other caregivers in Ontario who could be mentors. So for example, when my father had cancer, living with cancer, now cancer is probably not it is a good example, it isn't, because most people know people that have cancer. But let's say my mother wanted to have emotional support from another caregiver, wife, who's caregiving for someone with cancer. Then her and that caregiver, no matter where they live in Ontario, would support one another. And that would be her to-go person. Because sometimes my mom doesn't want to share everything with me and her tears with me. So we are preparing caregivers to become mentors, and we're taking existing caregivers who need the mentorship, we're matching them based on their background. So if anybody in this room is interested in becoming a mentor or requires one, please let me know, okay? I'll be here at the end of the session. Now, a couple more things we're working on. We want to provide caregiver education. We want to provide people like yourselves basic education on the do's and don'ts of caregiving. We want to provide you free online education, workshops, seminars, all free of charge. So you can come and learn how to be an ideal caregiver for your spouse, your child, etc. for free, no charge, okay? You don't have to be a registered nurse. You could be you caring for a spouse. We want to provide free education. We want to prevent burnout and prevent injury, okay? We want to also focus on minority groups. So gay, lesbian, Indigenous, people that live in very remote communities in Ontario. You know, a little town up north. They're not gonna see me on a weekly basis, right? So we want to focus to every population in Ontario. We are also going to develop really good tools for people who are caring for people with a mental illness or an addiction. That's a whole category in itself. And last but not least, we want to provide employers, employers of all sectors. So it doesn't matter if you work for a construction company, you work for Tim Hortons, you work for a retail. We want to provide employers of all sectors a toolkit that they can distribute to their employees of all ages. And we want that employer to understand that there will be times when their employees are caregivers before work, during lunch, after work. And we want employees to feel comfortable enough to tell their boss or ask their boss, I need to leave on Thursdays at 2 o'clock for the next 6 weeks because I'm a caregiver. We want that employee and that employer to have trust and support. And we're going to put that in place. We want to help caregivers of all ages. Doesn't matter of the disease, condition. It's really important. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, good. So I have a big area to cover. I went to North Bay already. On my way back to North Bay, I stopped in Sturgeon Falls, and then I see myself stopping at all types of organizations and agencies where caregivers can exist, because caregivers can be as young as 14, 15 years old, caring for a parent. And they need people to reach out to, and that's who we are. So at the back of the room, I've left my business cards, some little handouts, a little bag. Visit our website if you want to exchange business cards with me or give me your name and number. We'll start from there, okay? And then I'll keep you updated as things develop. So thank you so much.